in town will help the rest of your body settle to now as you breathe. And I want you to just say to yourself, I am. And as you breathe out, say to yourself, calm. I am calm. Repeat that a few times as you continue to breathe now, maintaining that same rhythm. Say to yourself, I am peaceful. I am peaceful. And finally, as you continue to unwind, say to yourself, I am sleepy. I am sleepy. Let those words stick with you as you listen along tonight. Now, imagine a vast land is eternally locked in an icy embrace. It stretches before you in shades of white and gray in the center. There's a pristine and glassy mountain, but soars into the clouds. It waits silently for an adventurer brave enough to scale it. And this is where our story, it's once upon a time winter fell suddenly upon an entire kingdom and never turned to spring. The freeze lasted so long that children were born and raised to adulthood, and they had never experienced a thaw. They had never seen the trees burst into bloom. They had never felt the summer sun on their faces. Of course, these children didn't know any other kind of life. They listened to their parents and grandparents telling tales of the seasons, and they couldn't quite imagine it. The pastel colors they knew were not in the flowers, but in the evening sky. The only verdant shade they understood was the eternal color of the evergreen tree, and of course most of nature was simply white. As much as their elders tried to conjure visions of rolling, lush hills, sunny wildflowers, and crystal blue rivers, they could only imagine it. The question of why this eternal winter had begun was never truly answered. However, one thing was certain at the same time, that the winter had settled and a formidable icy mountain had appeared in the center of the kingdom. It was so slippery and unapproachable, but it became known as the Glass Mountain. Rumor had it, but the ominous peak was the work of a sorcerer who, after squabbling with a king, cast to the man and his daughter to be marooned atop it. Forever many, our fireside tale had been told of men who had tried to scale the mountain, carrying a gift to win the hand of the stranded princess. Alas, it was nearly impossible to summit, and according to the stories, jealously guarded by an enormous, fearsome bird, every suitor who had attempted the quest had failed, ending up back at the bottom of the slope. Even those who had the sense to use an axe or an ice pick as leverage eventually had to let go of their tool in order to battle the monstrous bird to ascend the mountain and outlast the bird's advances. Seemed impossible. From brave knights to humble local farmers, it seemed that no one could conquer the glass obstacle and reach the princess. There was a very young man named Jaime who lived in the village by the foot of the mountain. He had grown up in the shadow of the enormous monument of ice, hearing the stories and seeing one hopeful adventurer after another meet with failure like all the others his age. He had never known any season but winter. Although he found stories of the summer intriguing, he didn't know why he should yearn for it. However, Jaime did love a challenge. He was a very clever boy. He had a great many chores to complete each day in order to help his parents make ends meet. However, in his free time, he enjoyed skating on the village pond, where he would make graceful circles gazing up at the sparkling mountain. As he came of age, he dreamed of being the one man who could reach the princess and woo her. While there were certainly many nice girls in the village who would have gladly been his sweetheart, he wished to know what lay beyond his small hamlet. He did not want to live a life without experiencing adventure. Jaime thought and thought about how he might get to the top of that glistening peak, and he hatched a plan that was almost ridiculously simple. At dinner one night, sitting at the wooden table by his family's half, he told his parents what he was going to do. He planned to use his ice skates to anchor his feet while he scaled the mountain. That way, when the fabled giant bird appeared, he would have his hands free to ward it off. His mother was fretful, fearing Jaime would injure himself with this mad scheme. His father was equally skeptical. How could Jaime succeed where so many more worldly and experienced men had failed? Hoping to dissuade him, his parents pressed him with questions. How would he battle the large bird with his hands? What gift could he possibly take for the princess? Jaime had to admit that he didn't have the answers to those questions, but he could not be swayed. He was determined to attempt the climb. The next day, Jaime's mother whispered her concerns to the neighbor. Then the neighbor, in hushed tones, told her daughter. The daughter told the boy across the street. The news traveled throughout the village like lightning. So it was that by the time Jaime had readied himself to approach the mountain, the entire town was out to watch the spectacle. Taking a rucksack with a loaf of bread and a bottle of water, he tied his skates together and draped them over his shoulder. Then, ignoring the stares of the villages, he put his head down and walked resolutely towards the mysterious peak of ice, he would not be deterred by their doubts. As he trunched down the path that led to the bottom of the mountain, he breathed deeply, studying himself, ignoring the pack of curious neighbors who would follow behind him. He went over his plan in short. It was simple. He would use his ice skates to scale the bag. When the bird came, he would somehow shelter himself with his hands or smack it away. Hopefully his lack of a gift would not keep him from entering the castle and meeting the princess when he arrived. Foreign strategy. He had prepared nothing else. The woods lay silently around him, glistening with an ever-present blanket of sparkling snow. As he walked, each step made a sound that seemed unusually loud in the stillness. Thought crunch, his boots said to the void. The rhythm calmed him, and he sank into a meditative state, and then he was there. Abruptly, a sheer wall of glistening ice rose steeply before him. Without any visible handhold or foothold to be found, Jaime was aware the villagers were watching from the forest. He dropped his skates from his shoulders and removed his rucksack. Then, sitting on a large rock, he removed his boots, donning the skates in their place. He put his boots in his rucksack, for he imagined he'd need them when he reached the top. Then he turned and faced his greatest obstacle head-on, putting the rucksack securely on his back. He took a tentative step, lodging the pick of his skate blade into the ice. Then, stepping up, he placed the other skate blade slightly above it. The hill was steep, but the incline was just enough that he could lean forward, balancing himself on the slippery surface with his hands, continuing slowly with one foot above the other. He began to climb. Jaime didn't allow himself to think about how much time was passing or how much energy he had left. Pick, step, hoist, he willed himself into the slow pattern of the looking neither right nor left, and certainly not up or down gaggle of villages soon faded into the background of his consciousness. As his climbing continued, he became vaguely aware that he was moving out of the shadow at the bottom of the hill. He was reaching a height at which the chilly rays of the winter sun lit the ice in his path, and what a sight! It was simultaneously translucent and impenetrable. The mountain seemed to contain infinite mirrors that reflected the light from outside. Unlike an ordinary mountain, this one glittered as if it had been made of faceted crystal. As he rose farther and farther upward, the sunshine the mountain was reflecting became almost blinding in its power. It refracted again and again inside the icy slope, casting its brilliant rays outward and into his line of vision rather than making the air feel warmer. However, the brilliance was accompanied by an increasing chill. Fact, Jaime felt that he had never been so cold. An icy breeze seemed to blow constantly around his head and shoulders, creating an incessant whistling droned on in his ears. He didn't know how much time had passed. Jaime's reverie was eventually broken by another sound. Distant bird call floated on top of the wind. First, it seemed far away, then it began to feel closer. Turning his face upward, he tried to spot the source of the noise. He knew it must be the infamous bird he had been expecting. At first, all he could see was the dazzling sunlight. Then from nowhere, a pair of unnaturally large wings